being in the family is to do the big rides, and then then you've done it. You're part of the picture. So, but the photo work, the souvenirs, it turned out were quite deeply contested. They were quite a source of friction among people. So, for example, this is Jamie. This is his first big ride. This is the official Nemesis souvenir photo. And I don't know what you think, but I think Jamie looks scared. Jamie didn't want his parents to buy this photo for some reason. Jamie's preferred souvenir was this medal that he could take to school. And show. And actually, Jamie also rather liked the photo that his granddad took of him getting off the ride, where he looks suitably proud to have conquered his rite of passage. Jamie's parents loved this photo. They thought it was great, and they wanted it, and they tried to persuade him to let them buy it, and he wouldn't let them buy it, and they didn't buy it. And at Alton Towns, you then can't go back and buy it, you lose the chance. And for the rest of the day, the mum in particular just whinged about the fact she wished she'd got that photo, she wished she'd kept that photo. So it's quite complex. My point is there are multiple historic trajectories at play, different retellings, because people have got different viewpoints that they want to convey to others. Jamie's and Jamie's mum's stories that they want to tell are quite different.
So did they take a picture of the display that had...
They didn't in that case, but should have, and it's quite a common practice for people to do that. You see that quite a lot at theme parks, people trying to use their mobiles to capture that. But I don't know if because they were with us, they felt a bit perhaps constrained.
So you had access on the back?
Sorry, okay, as part of the study, we kept, we had consent to keep the pictures, so whether James' mum does have a picture, I wouldn't know now, but yes, so we captured it.
They know what you do.
The other thing that went on was participants want to capture lots more than just the rides. So there are various props and souvenirs around it. Jamie was particularly interested in birds. He spent a huge amount of time taking pictures of bird life around Alton Towns because that's what he's interested in. That's fine. So as a result, because I appreciate I'm running out of time, these studies inspired us to build a new kind of souvenir system for making historic trajectories from your theme park day that we call Automics. And what Automics does is firstly, it mixes together the park's official photos from the rides with your own photos that you took within your group. So it's a group-oriented thing, so you can pool all the photos you take, but then it lets each of you tell your own particular story about the ride you went on. So here's Automics in a nutshell. As you go around the park, you use your mobile phone to take pictures of whatever you want. That might be, well, it's whatever you want, or it might be photo opportunities as well. And actually, there are some location-based triggers are put in the system to prompt you to do this. So if you're near a photo opportunity, your mobile goes, bing, could be a good time to take a photo. Whenever you take a photo, it's automatically shared with the other people in your group, not with the whole world, but you register as a group for this service. So anyone else gets to see the photo you took. And that makes sense because the photos you take are often actually of the other people in your group. So they're as much of interest to these people as they are to you. Perhaps more use to them for telling their story. So yeah, they're shared and you get to see them on your phone. So whenever someone takes a photo, it appears and you say, oh, someone just took that. You can then caption the photos. You can put speech bubbles on them and other labels on them. And as soon as you do that, they're shared again. They go back into the book. The captioning is anonymous, although in a small group. It's pretty easy to tell who's doing what. But they go back in the shared book. The on-ride photos are also put in the shared pool. And those can be captioned in the same way as your own photos. So the kind of parks system and your system all gets matched up in this pool. At some point, after you've been on a ride, you're then asked to select 3 images from the pool of annotated images that you think best represent your ride experience. And actually, we also put some location-based triggers in this. You would get these prompts when you were in queues for the next ride, because we figured that was good downtime. You're bored with us queuing, the system would go, we think you're in a queue. It's quite easy to spot when people are in a queue using GPS on the whole. And it would say, well, now's a really good time to think about making one of these souvenirs. And so you do a bit of work, and you had to select, you went for the simplest possible narrative, the rite of passage, 3 images, before, during, and after. They don't actually have to be before, during, and after. It's whatever you choose to represent before, during, and after. And then the system makes one of these for you. So it takes your 3 images and it sticks them into a template of spec material and branding, of course, so the theme park gets its branding all over it. And it says, we've just made your 1-page personal photo story of your ride. Okay? And that's on an individual basis. So although you're selecting from the shared pool, you as a person get to choose your own. You may have spotted they get pretty scatological among the adults. So, you get family-oriented ones, and for groups of students and visitors going around the park, you get more adult-themed ones, and there's a lot of poking fun at other people. So that's the atomic system. And that, for me, is, I suppose, is the most sophisticated example we made yet of the historic trajectory at play. This is a technology that really is about getting you to create different historic trajectories of your experience, and very explicitly taking the stuff that you do and repurposing it for storytelling. One kind of final thing I'd add, I mentioned several times through that this idea that we use location-based triggers to interrupt people at various points. Now's a good time to take a photo. Now's a good time to make an atomic. Now's a good time to do whatever. And that was partially successful. I won't go into the details of the study. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it was a real pain in the backside, and people were annoyed by the notifications they got. Very coarsely, what we concluded actually was, if you look at the canonical trajectory of the visitor's experience, you can roughly label it with good and bad times to interrupt people, opportune and inopportune moments. So, for example, it is, on the whole, quite good to interrupt the spectator when they're in the queue. People on the whole actually said, yeah, that was just fine. You know, if I was in the queue, I didn't mind getting prodded. It turns out to be pretty, well, you can't interrupt the rider when they're on the ride. The rule at Alton Towers is no mobile phones to be used on the ride, so that's strictly out of bounds. It's actually quite bad to interrupt people at those moments as well. When they're coming back together, they're already going to talk. They've got a head full of stuff they want to say, including when's lunch, when's the toilets, and that's a bad moment to be pinging them with stuff, in general. So, coming together. Things like lunch turned out to be really ambiguous, the study showed. Sometimes it was nice to be reminded to do stuff, but other times people were too busy trying to get the pizza in, so it's kind of quite complicated. That's, lots more work to be done on that, but I thought just as an aside. So, let me wrap up. What on earth has that got to do with presence? I don't know is the honest answer, but I have some questions that I'll kind of finish the talk with. Strikes me that in these experiences, presence, if that's what's important, is very, very much a theatrically accomplished experience. There are all sorts of, I won't use the word tricks, I'll just deal, I guess, tactics and strategies that artists use to engineer particular moments where I do think you have a deep emotional engagement with the work. Is that presence? You tell me. And it takes a lot of work to create those moments. A whole lot of framing, rituals, transitions to hit one of those kind of peak moments where you're really getting something, I think. So, implicit what I said there is that the sense of presence, if you like, being constant perhaps throughout one of these extended experiences, perhaps it's not. Perhaps presence is something that you're trying to achieve key moments of throughout an extended experience. And it's how you design for those killer or punch moments of engagement with the virtual world or the work, where somebody really is transported out of the everyday current thing they're doing into something that the artist has created. Transitions, I think, are real important, I suspect, in terms of presence. Traversals seem to be particularly interesting. How do you get in and out of a virtual world? What are the right mechanics for that? Or is it okay to stand in the cave and put the headset on, see the graphics wobbling around you, and then when it settles down, you're in? Is that okay? Or does it need to be more theatrically managed than that? And scenes, for sure. And I certainly know that Anthony Steele and co have written about breaks in presence as kind of one of their kind of ways of thinking about how presence works. And it seems to me that scenes, disconnections, that you can't always anticipate them exactly when they're going to happen, but you know for sure that they are going to happen, those are really critical moments. And if you don't have a strategy for dealing with them, then I think presence is at risk. How do you split or manage the shift of presence between different ongoing experiences? I haven't really talked about that, have I, in the work here? Everything I've said to you has almost been assuming that you're just doing one thing at a time. You're doing Uncle Roy and nothing else. You're in the theme park and nothing else. But actually, in many experiences, that's not really the case. I mean, if you're in the theme park, you may attend to your work emails, you may make a phone call. Olden Tales don't encourage it. They have a concept of fantastical escapism, they call it, which tries to discourage you from doing it. If you're playing a text messaging mobile game for a month, it really is interleaved with your other activities. So how do you steer people along these different threads of activity and switch them from one to the other? And last of all, I would offer up, I think really, really important, increasingly so, is the notion of it's not just about the moment of doing it. It is very much about your reflection on the moment and your storytelling about the moment and the resources that the system gives you to do that. So I would suggest that experiences that focus just on the live moment of creating presence but neglect the ability to reflect or retell about that are probably missing a trick. So that's it for me. I thank you very much for your attention. It has been a long talk. Funny enough, there is a book. You're welcome to buy it, and I'm really happy to take questions. Thank you. Please.
One of the things about many of your works, which I think is really, really brave from a theatrical point of view, is that you very often take the visitor or the audience member and force them to do this alone. And that's almost that's so unusual in any kind of theatrical situation. I think you'd probably agree if you go to cinema, theatre, you're always with a friend or something. And I was wondering how deliberate that is in terms of the sense of unease or self-consciousness, which affects how you behave. We're always braver with a friend, and we laugh about things, but if you're doing these location-based games alone, you're suddenly separated. That's got to have a big effect. And how do you have sort of data on that? Have you studied that? Is that something you do deliberately and consciously? And
so, yes, I think it is really important, and convinced through our studies or interviews and discussions with artists about how they make it work, that isolation is a deliberate tactic, and that when you're designing on these things, I would encourage you to draw out these possible participant trajectory lines and think about, yes, when might they cross, what happens, but also how are we going to make sure that people are alone at some point in the experience. I don't think it's necessarily about being alone all of the time. I think most of the experiences also bring people together at key points, but it's that movement between being on your own, focused on the thing, but also focused on just your own feelings about the thing, away from the distractions of how someone else is feeling and the comfort of being with them, that then bringing you back together becomes really interesting. So I think isolation is a really vital tactic in all of these experiences, but it is only one part of the journey.
I guess a follow-on question from that then is, I was really interested if you have data about how much people diverge. You had the sense of how much you try to bring people back or steer people back, just quantitatively over the years you've been doing this. What kind of percentage of people either just kind of wander off because they're a bit odd or something, or how many people try to break the game or second guess or try to push, to move themselves out, as opposed to people who enjoy it and are compliant and wish to experience it as it was meant to be, if you like?
We would have some data about people's patterns of interaction, spatially or often temporally. So, for example, for data figurines, we did manage to visualise people's patterns of engagement and stepping and coming back. So occasionally we do get to be like quantitative data that we can visualise that helps. But on the whole, I would have to give you opinion, I guess. I'm not sure I have data to back it up. So my opinion is Most of the works we've done over the years are tightly orchestrated and scripted, and probably not many people are lost. Some do come back early, some clearly have a bad time and don't like it. That's quite normal with artistic works, particularly of these kinds. But not many are lost, and I think probably not many people try and game these systems, because I think it's kind of clear in the framing of these works that if you want to get the payoff, you're going to have to go with the flow. So that's the dialogue the artist set up. Is like, you're giving up trust to us, we will give you a good thing back, but you are going to work yourself to follow the rules. If you're making games, though, that are competitive, or experiences that you download and play on your own, and we haven't yet done enough of that, we should do more, then I think it would be a different thing. Then I think people will wander off, or game the system in a competitive edge, or not feel quite as obliged to work quite as hard to stay with you. So I think in our experiences we have quite a tight implicit contract between the participants and the former by the time they've bought a ticket and they're into it, that it's in no one's interest that they give up. But in other experiences, very different.
I guess if I could piggyback on that kind of question of buying into the game, I was thinking as you were talking, you've done all these interviews and things with individuals. What about people who have done? Is there anybody that have participated as you have with those particular performing groups in that group's different activities? So they've had repeated exposure to different types of activities that a particular artistic group has done. So it's not just a completely novel experience. Do you have such people?
All good questions, which are the answer. We haven't done anything to explicitly ask that question. It would be a good question to
Okay. So you don't know if you've had multiple people or somebody who's gone through different.
I suspect if we looked, we would find out that we have, because the audiences for some of these groups of artists are not huge and pretty loyal, and so I think that you will see the same people turning up and doing it, and it wouldn't surprise me, but we would have to go back and look at it, and if you like, it's not an opportunity to take it. Just a bit more about our about the ethnographic studies. They're not really interviews in the sense that they're not led by interview. You don't go in with a set of questions that you want to ask. You go in with a view to document and observe, and you then ask questions when it helps explain what you're seeing. So if you like, observation leads interview, not interview leads observation. I think, and typically what we then have is quite a small, because it's a very in-depth, rich technique, you tend to follow only small groups of people. So for each experience you're probably going to be looking at, in the region of 8 to 10 participants or 2 to 3 groups. So you're sampling in a rich way a few experiences, and obviously if you're the kind of person who prefers a more rigorous sampling of a larger number of people, then it's not a great technique. We can't make many statistical claims. I would never dare to say that 97% of people love this. That's not the data we have.
I've been an orchestrator for many years before I went to this life. And what I found interesting is where safety and fire things, but also the bad things of the orchestration. So cues that are too long, breaks you have to wait for too long, too crowded, too many people in front of the music. So there is resistance in orchestration. And the way you tell the story now, and also your graphs, you don't measure the resistance. Well, I find as an orchestrator, it's very important to use the resistance.
Okay. So tell me a bit more what you mean
by
resistance.
For example, if we take the SMS game, or the augmented game, compare, like 20 years ago or so, there was on the radio in Holland, there was a rally, people had to find a treasure. Was a great artist doing this on the radio, and I don't know, hundreds of people went followed his cues on the radio, huge traffic jam, even an accident. So this is all very nice as experiment, but if you make this real and it touches people in the heart and you want to get it, you also get responsibility for, like the football soccer statements. And so there is fiction happening when you really do the games, like you will have in the theme park. It's like smooth, so all those things. But I think one of the big mistakes of many theme parks, in my experience, is that they don't take persistence serious. So sometimes it's good that people have to wait. Sometimes it's good that the room is too low or the area is too small, because then you will experience the square of it.
Right.
Yeah? So you have to design frictions and you have to design resistance into those trajectories. And now it looks like they come from technology and finding out how it works. But actually, to make the mixed reality make sense, the resistance has to have a role in your story. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. I'm not sure, it's a really interesting comment, and on the fly, I'm not sure, I guess, how I would incorporate it into diagrams or framework. But yeah, I think that notion of, if you like, there is resistance to the smooth flow of experience, but that can be designed in or exploited in a positive way is interesting. I mean, it definitely comes up in conversations, I think, as you suggested. I mean, various people I've been on teams have suggested that a small amount of queuing may be a good thing.
Otherwise you don't get the feeling.
Yeah. Now, anyone from the theme park will flatly deny that. So, no, queuing is always bad. But I think you're right. Anticipation and some sense of resistance, and as you say, yeah, the southern square opening up, the payoff moment. I think you're right. I think that is part of the.
I would hire people to make a mess. You know, if I had a show that was too smooth, I would hire an artist to, with a specific task, come in and make sure 3 moments make no trouble. Yeah. And then people feel that something's happening.
Yeah.
It's not.
I guess my response, if you were to point to your trajectories, would be, I think you're exactly right, but I think people then would presumably design that resistance into the canonical trajectory. You would say, yeah, we are going to have a moment of queuing or delay at this point. We're going to slow things down so the tension builds. But then you still need to orchestrate around that to some extent. Yeah. So
that seems to me that that's right, because that's where you're maximising the sense of presence in those different moments that you're looking to get. So as you say, you lull down and then you bring people right into the story at particular points in your trajectory. And I think for those going on the ghost tour tonight, they'll witness exactly that. The way that is managed in the streets of Edinburgh is really nice, because again you do have exactly that tiny little alleyway and then coming into the big you know. So I
Don't give it away.
No, I'm not giving anything away. I'm just the principle of what we're talking about. It was just going through my mind. It's actually quite good.
That I agree.
okay, there's a question to that.
Right. I haven't been on the ghost tour, so I don't know if it's an open-ended trajectory, but I wanted to ask you about that, because obviously in Uncle Roy, the whole point is to end up finding Uncle Roy, so there's an end point. But have you also worked with more open trajectories where it doesn't really matter if you find him or find the dead skeleton that we will probably get? So if you see what I mean, the need to get people back onto the canonical trajectory was sort of built into the design?
So we don't have much experience of that yet. Pretty much the things we've done to date and this thinking is coming from are quite closed trajectories. There is an arc that moves in quite a carefully planned way from beginning to end with a coda or some follow-on. You're absolutely right, that would be the next place to go. I think the theme park is a step towards that, because what you do see in the theme park is the renegotiation of that plan, that canonical trajectory. So it's a bit more open-ended. You're there for the whole day. You do a bit.
You want to do all. My children want to do all. So it's different, the theme park.
Yeah.
Than what I'm proposing.
Yes, it's kind of moving a step towards that in the sense there is, I think, a bit more of a sense of renegotiation at various points of the plan. Although it's a closed experience.
Each point has been set out in the theme park.
So I guess the next thing is to look at longer experiences too. So one could think about experiences such as holidays or longer trips. And ultimately, of course, one can think about services that you engage with on a really ongoing basis. Again, what is the trajectory of Facebook, for example, and how do you engage and transition into it? So I think it's exactly the right question to ask. does this kind of thinking have any relevance to ongoing, longer, more open experiences? I hope that it might, but I can't say I did, but I can tell you that it does.
We have time for one more question, I think. Good. In that case, can I ask you a question? In what sense are trajectories metaphorical? I mean, are we to take them as literal things?
I suppose it is metaphorical.
You said it's a kind of narrative, that they are quite like stories that have a beginning, middle and end. Are they metaphorical?
No, I'm not sure, yes. Somebody else may want to help with the answer. I'm not, yes, there is a good chunk of metaphor in there, isn't it? Yes, the trajectory must have been defined for whatever, physically shooting missiles.
Oh,
So yeah, I'm taking that metaphor and applying it to a new concept. So yes, it is metaphorical. But I guess what they are really, my point of view is a sort of an abstraction, conceptual framework in HCI computer science sense that you recognise you're abstracting away from the world, so you don't claim that this describes all cases, all realities, and that it can't be challenged and broken down.
Then in that case, where does the metaphor break down? If it is metaphorical.
Yes, I don't know, maybe in some of the places that have been raised, so maybe it will break down when we start to think about ongoing experiences that are very open-ended, perhaps then the sense of it won't make as much sense to think about them in terms of trajectories. I mean, the point of a concept like this is it's only as good as it's useful. So if it provides you, it doesn't try and describe all aspects of an experience or all things. If it provides you with a useful lens, for example, for analysing experience, so if you find it useful to say, well, I could maybe try and describe that experience in terms of trajectories, and that would tell me something I didn't think of before, or if it's useful for designing, work with it. But if not, ditch it. And I think it may well break down the open-ended experiences. It may well break down the experiences that have a much less strong sense of pre-authored structure.
Okay. I'm sorry. I actually think it makes it a much more interesting way, or it opens a possibility for studying interactivity that I hadn't considered before. Because I think sometimes when you look at trying to experimentally study interactivity, you go, well, these 5 people all had completely different experiences, so how can you study it? But having the idea of the trajectory allows you to sort of say, at this point it was the same, and at this point it was the same, and so it can provide a really interesting, if we could figure it out more, I think it could provide a very useful and interesting way to study interactivity.
Just to quickly, I know we're out of time to come back on that. I mean, I think it's fair to say we are finding it useful. It's early days yet in terms of studies. So it does give us what we would call sensitising concepts, which to approach our data and think about it. What's much less clear, what we're struggling with, is whether it's useful as a proactive design concept. And in one of the museum projects we're working on at the moment, we're trying to table trajectories from the beginning. So, hey, we could think about this experience this way, and that's not clear. And that's always the problem with these conceptual frameworks in HCI, is great for helping you analyse data and publish papers, good for designing stuff. Don't know, and I think that's another big challenge.
Okay. Thanks, Steve, again.